The day my own children called me a technological dinosaur in front of their friends was the same day I realized they had no idea. Their old man was sitting on a fortune that would change everything. My name is Alexander Brooks, and at 62 years old, I've learned that sometimes the most profound lessons come wrapped in the cruelest packages. This is the story of how a simple paper planner became both my greatest humiliation and my ultimate vindication. It was a crisp October morning in 2023. Here in my suburban home in Westchester County, New York, the autumn leaves were painting the neighborhood in brilliant oranges and reds, and I was doing what I'd done every morning for the past 30 years, sitting at my oak desk, carefully writing appointments in my worn leather-bound planner with my favorite blue ink pen. The sound of footsteps thundering down the stairs broke my concentration. My youngest son, Marcus, 24, fresh out of Columbia with a computer science degree, burst into my home office with his usual energy. "Dad, seriously?" Marcus shook his head, his eyes fixed on my planner. "It's 2023. Why are you still using that ancient thing?" I looked up from writing dentist appointment 2 p.m. and smiled. "This ancient thing, as you call it, has served me well for over 3 decades, son." "But Dad," Marcus continued, pulling out his iPhone, "look at this." He showed me his screen, filled with colorful digital calendars, notifications, and reminders. Everything syncs. I can set location-based alerts, share calendars with people, back up to the cloud. Your paper planner is like using a horse and buggy when everyone else is driving Tesla. I chuckled and returned to my writing. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. What Marcus didn't know, what none of my 3 children knew, was that this dinosaur had made a decision back in 1997 that would eventually prove to be worth more than their combined annual salaries. But that revelation was still weeks away. Later that afternoon, my daughter Sarah, 28, arrived with her husband Mike and their 2 kids for our weekly Sunday dinner. Sarah worked as a marketing executive for a tech startup in Manhattan, and she shared Marcus's bewilderment about my analog approach to life. "Dad, we need to talk," she announced, settling into the living room while her kids played on their tablets. "Mike and I have been discussing this, and we think it's time you entered the 21st century. My eldest son David, 30, nodded in agreement from his spot on the couch. He was a financial advisor who lived and breathed by digital tools. "Dad, I've been meaning to mention this too. Some of my clients are younger than your planner. It's embarrassing." The word hit me like a physical blow. Embarrassing. My own children were embarrassed by me. "I've managed my life perfectly fine with this system," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your mother and I raised 3 successful children, built a comfortable life, and never missed an important appointment or event." "Mom adapted," Sarah shot back. "Before she passed, she was using an iPhone, online banking, even social media. You're stuck in the past." The mention of my late wife, Eleanor, stung. She had passed away 2 years earlier from cancer, and since then, my children had become increasingly concerned about my outdated lifestyle. What they saw as stubborn resistance to change, I saw as holding on to the things that mattered. "Look, Dad," David said, softening his tone slightly, "we're not trying to hurt your feelings. We're worried about you. What if something happens? What if you lose that planner? What if there's a fire? All your information would be gone. What if the internet goes down?" I countered. "What if your phone breaks? What if you lose your password?" Marcus rolled his eyes. "Dad, there's cloud backup for everything. Plus, the internet doesn't just go down anymore." "You sound like Grandpa talking about trusting banks instead of keeping money under the mattress." That comparison stung more than they knew. My father had been a Depression-era man who distrusted anything newfangled, and I'd spent years trying not to become him. But here I was, apparently following the same path. "Besides," Sarah added, "keeping everything on paper makes you look unprofessional. When you pull out that old planner in meetings or appointments, people notice. They wonder if you're really keeping up with the times." I felt my face flush. "Are you saying my business associates don't take me seriously?" "I'm saying that first impressions matter," Sarah replied. "And when someone sees a senior citizen fumbling with a paper planner while everyone else is using smartphones and tablets, they make assumptions." The conversation continued for another hour, with my children presenting a unified front. They'd even researched tablets specifically designed for seniors, digital calendars with large fonts, and apps that could help me transition gradually to the modern world. By the time they left that evening, I felt smaller than I had in years. The house felt emptier without Eleanor's presence to buffer these family dynamics, and I found myself questioning everything. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was holding on to the past out of stubbornness rather than wisdom. I sat in my study that night, staring at my planner. Its leather cover was worn smooth from years of handling. The pages were filled with my careful handwriting appointments, reminders, important dates, phone numbers, addresses. It contained the entire infrastructure of my life. But as I flipped through those pages, something caught my eye that my children hadn't noticed during their intervention. Tucked between the back pages were several small pieces of paper, stock certificates and investment records that I had been keeping track of the old-fashioned way. One particular entry made me pause. AAPL, 1,000 shares, $18, September 1997. I smiled for the first time that day. If only they knew what their embarrassing father had been quietly accumulating all these years, while they'd been busy chasing the latest trends in technology. But that story, the real story behind my paper planner, would have to wait for the right moment to reveal itself. Before we continue with Alexander's story, if you're enjoying this journey, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will touch your heart. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's see what happens next. The humiliation I felt that Sunday was nothing compared to what awaited me the following Tuesday. I had a meeting scheduled with the Riverside Community Center board about renewing their insurance policy, something I'd been handling for over 15 years. As a semi-retired insurance broker, I still maintained a few select clients, more for the social interaction than the income. I arrived at the community center at 10 a.m. sharp, my leather planner tucked under my arm as always. The meeting room was filled with faces I'd known for years, but today there were 3 new members, all appearing to be in their 30s or 40s. "Alex," called out Janet Morrison, the board president. "Great to see you. Everyone, this is Alexander Brooks, our longtime insurance provider." I smiled and took my seat, pulling out my planner to reference the notes I'd prepared about their policy renewal. As I opened it and began flipping through pages, I noticed one of the new board members, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a crisp business suit, lean over to whisper something to the man beside her. They both glanced at my planner and exchanged what I can only describe as amused looks. "So, Alex," Janet began, "we need to discuss the renewal terms and any potential changes for next year." I opened my planner to the right page, where I'd handwritten all the relevant policy details, premium calculations, and notes about their coverage needs. "Of course, based on your current coverage and the claims history, I recommend—" "Excuse me," the blonde woman interrupted. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, the new treasurer. I was wondering, do you have digital copies of these documents? Everything we do now is electronic, and we'll need files we can share via email and store in our cloud system." I felt a familiar pang of discomfort. "I can certainly provide printed copies of all official documents. Everything is properly filed and organized, but digital copies," pressed another new member, a man wearing trendy glasses and a casual blazer. "We're trying to go paperless, environmental responsibility, and all that." I can have my assistant scan documents if needed," I said, knowing full well I didn't actually have an assistant anymore, another cost I'd cut after Eleanor's medical bills. What happened next still makes my stomach churn. Jennifer Walsh actually laughed, not maliciously, but with the kind of patronizing amusement you might show a child trying to use a grown-up tool. "A paper planner," she said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "That's so, vintage. My grandmother used one of those." She turned to the man beside her. "Tom, didn't you tell me about that digital transformation seminar? About how businesses, still using analog systems, are basically admitting they're not keeping up?" Tom nodded enthusiastically. "Studies show that clients lose confidence in service providers who don't embrace modern technology. It raises questions about competency and relevance." I felt the blood drain from my face. Around the table, people I'd known for years, Janet, Bob, Maria, were suddenly looking at me differently. Not with the respect I'd grown accustomed to, but with something that looked uncomfortably like pity. "Now, Jennifer," Janet said diplomatically, "Alex has been providing excellent service for many years." "Oh, I'm sure he has," Jennifer replied, her tone suggesting otherwise. "It's just that in today's world, efficiency and accessibility are crucial." What if there's an emergency and you need to access client information remotely? What if that planner gets lost or damaged? The meeting continued, but I could feel the shift in the room's energy. When I referenced information from my planner, I noticed people exchanging glances. When I mentioned I'd need to look into certain digital filing requirements, I saw eyebrows raised. By the time the meeting ended, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. In 90 minutes, "Alex, could I speak with you privately?" Janet asked as others filed out. My heart sank. Of course. When we were alone, Janet's expression was kind but troubled. "Alex, you know I have tremendous respect for you and the work you've done for us over the years, but," I prompted, knowing what was coming. "But the board has been discussing modernization. We're implementing new systems, new processes." Jennifer raised some valid points about needing service providers who can integrate with our digital infrastructure. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. "I understand. We're not making any immediate changes," Janet assured me quickly. "But for next year's renewal, well, we might need to explore options that better align with our technological direction." The drive home was a blur. I'd been with that account for 15 years. These people had trusted me with their organization's protection, had invited me to board holiday parties, had sent flowers when Eleanor died, and now they were questioning my competency because of a paper planner. When I got home, I found Marcus waiting in my driveway. He was leaning against his Tesla Model 3, scrolling through his phone. "Hey Dad," he called out as I parked. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately suspicious. Marcus rarely made unannounced visits. "Nothing's wrong. Can't a son visit his father?" He followed me into the house, but his casual demeanor felt forced. "Actually, Sarah called me. She mentioned you seemed pretty upset after our conversation Sunday." I set my planner on the kitchen counter and started making coffee, needing something to do with my hands. "I'm fine, Dad. Look, we weren't trying to gang up on you. We're just concerned." "Concerned about what, exactly?" Marcus hesitated. "About why owe you keeping up? About you being able to manage things on your own." There it was, the real fear beneath their criticism. They didn't just think I was technologically behind. They thought I was becoming incompetent, incapable, a burden waiting to happen. "Marcus," I said slowly, "I've been managing my life successfully for 6 decades. I raised 3 children, built a career, cared for your mother through her illness, and maintained my independence. What exactly makes you think I can't keep up?" "It's not just the planner, Dad. It's everything. You still write checks instead of using online banking. You call businesses instead of using their websites. You drive places to ask questions instead of Googling them. It's like you're afraid of technology." "I'm not afraid," I said, though even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. "I just prefer methods that have worked for me." "But what if something happens to you? What if you have an emergency and can't get to your planner? What if you need to access important information and it's all written down in that book?" His questions echoed Jennifer Walsh's concerns from the meeting, and I felt the walls closing in. Everyone seemed to believe that my way of doing things wasn't just outdated, it was dangerous. "Maybe," I said quietly, "you should all stop worrying about your old man and focus on your own lives." Marcus's expression softened. "Dad, we worry because we love you, but sometimes love means telling someone hard truths." After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at my planner on the counter. For the first time in 35 years, I truly questioned whether it was helping or hurting me. I opened it to October 15th, 1997, a date I'd circled and starred. Next to it, in my careful handwriting, were the words that would soon change everything. AAPL purchase complete. 1,000 shares at $18. Speculated position. 28,000 shares. As of October 2023, at that moment, Apple's stock was trading at $175 per share. I did the math in my head. 28,000 shares times $175 equals $4.9 million. My children thought I was behind the times, but my outdated approach to record keeping had been tracking one of the greatest investment success stories in American history. The same planner they mocked contained documentation of a fortune that would secure their children's college educations and fund their retirements. But they didn't know that yet. And given how they'd treated me lately, I was beginning to wonder if they deserved to know. The seeds of a plan began forming in my mind, a plan that would teach my children a lesson they'd never forget. The plan that had been forming in my mind crystallized over the next few days. If my children were so convinced that I was incompetent and out of touch, perhaps it was time to let them discover just how wrong they were, but on my terms, not theirs. It started with a phone call on Thursday morning. "Dad." Sarah's voice sounded strained through the phone. "We need to talk. Can you come over tonight for dinner? Is everything all right? Just ... Please come. Mike's making his famous lasagna." I agreed, though something in her tone made me uneasy. When I arrived at Sarah and Mike's house in Scarsdale that evening, I immediately noticed the atmosphere felt different, too formal, too careful. David was already there with his wife Lisa, and Marcus had driven up from the city. All three of my children were present, along with their spouses, creating what felt uncomfortably like a tribunal. "Dad, please sit down," Sarah said, gesturing to the armchair they'd obviously designated as mine. "We need to have a serious conversation." I sat, my planner resting on my lap, as always. "What's this about?" David cleared his throat. He'd clearly been designated as the spokesperson. "Dad, we've been talking, and we're concerned about your ability to manage your affairs independently." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "My affairs seem to be managing just fine, are they?" Marcus interjected. "Dad, Marcus told us about your meeting at the community center. You're losing clients because you can't keep up with modern business practices." I told them about Janet Morrison calling. David added, "She didn't want to hurt your feelings, but she asked me as a friend if we thought you might be struggling with cognitive issues." My face flushed with anger. "Cognitive issues? Dad, please don't take this the wrong way," Sarah said quickly, "but when someone your age resists all forms of modern technology, refuses to adapt to changing times, and shows signs of isolation after losing mum ... well, it raises red flags." Lisa, David's wife, leaned forward. "My grandmother went through something similar. She became increasingly resistant to change, defensive about her capabilities. We didn't recognize the early signs of decline until it was almost too late." "Are you suggesting I have dementia?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "We're suggesting you might benefit from an evaluation," David said diplomatically, "just to establish a baseline, to make sure everything's okay upstairs." Mike, Sarah's husband, spoke up for the first time. "Mr. Brooks, we've also been looking into some excellent assisted living communities, not because we think you need them now, but so we can plan ahead. The waiting lists for the good places are years long." I stared at them in disbelief. My own children were discussing putting me in a home because I used a paper planner. "Let me understand this correctly," I said slowly. "You think I'm mentally declining because I prefer analog systems to digital ones?" "It's not just that, Dad," Marcus said. "It's the isolation, the resistance to change, the inability to adapt to new situations. These are all warning signs. Warning signs of what? Of someone who might not be capable of making sound decisions anymore." Sarah said gently. "Dad, what if something happens to you? What if you forget to pay bills, or have a medical emergency, or make poor financial decisions? We need to know you're okay." The irony was staggering. Here I was, sitting on a nearly $5 million investment that I'd carefully managed and tracked for over 25 years, while my children questioned my financial judgment. "Have I missed any bills?" I asked. "Well, no," David admitted. "Have I had any accidents or medical emergencies that I couldn't handle? No. But have I made any poor financial decisions recently?" "Dad, that's just it," Sarah interrupted. "We don't know. You don't talk to us about your finances. You don't share information about your investments, your insurance, your estate planning. You keep everything locked away in that planner like some kind of state secret, maybe because it's none of your business," I replied sharply. The room fell silent. My children exchanged glances, the kind of meaningful looks that suggested they'd already discussed this exact scenario. "Dad," David said carefully, "that attitude is exactly what we're worried about. Healthy, competent people don't become secretive about basic life management. They don't resist reasonable accommodations. They don't isolate themselves from family support." I felt trapped, cornered by their circular logic. Every defense I offered only seemed to reinforce their diagnosis. "So what exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "We want you to see Dr. Patel for a comprehensive evaluation," Sarah said. "Cognitive tests, maybe some basic psychological assessments, just to establish that you're okay. And if I refuse?" Another exchange of glances. Dad, Marcus said quietly, we've been researching this. If there are legitimate concerns about someone's capacity to make decisions, family members can petition for guardianship proceedings. The threat hung in the air like smoke. My own children were talking about taking away my legal autonomy because I used a paper planner and valued my privacy. You would do that to me? I asked. We would do whatever it takes to protect you, David replied, even if it means protecting you from yourself. I stood up slowly, gripping my planner tighter. I see. And who would you suggest as guardian? You, David, since you're the financial advisor in the family. Dad, please don't make this adversarial, Sarah pleaded. We love you. We're trying to help. No, I said, my voice stronger now. You're trying to control me. There's a difference. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. You want to know about my finances. You want to know about my decision-making capabilities. Fine, but you'll learn on my schedule, not yours. What does that mean? Marcus asked. I smiled for the first time that evening, not a pleasant smile, but one that carried 35 years of careful planning and patience. It means that, next Sunday, at our regular family dinner, I'm going to show you exactly what your cognitively declining father has been managing all these years, and after that, we'll see who needs a competency evaluation. I left them sitting in stunned silence. The drive home gave me time to think. I'd spent the better part of a week feeling hurt and diminished by their attitude, but now I felt something else entirely, anticipation. They thought they knew everything about me, about my capabilities, about my financial situation. They were about to discover they didn't know anything at all. Back home, I opened my planner to the investment section, pages they'd never bothered to examine during their interventions. My handwritten records showed not just the Apple purchase, but a carefully diversified portfolio I'd been building for decades. Microsoft, 2,500 shares purchased. 1999 a 2003. Amazon, 1,2 shares purchased. 200005. Google, 800 shares purchased at IPO in 2004. Tesla, 500 shares purchased 2012 to 2014. Every purchase meticulously documented. Every dividend reinvestment recorded. Every stock split calculated and tracked. The total value, as of October 2023, was approaching $8 million. My children thought I was becoming incompetent. What they didn't realize was that their declining father had quietly become wealthy enough to buy and sell their combined net worth several times over, and I'd done it all with a paper planner. Sunday's revelation was going to be very interesting indeed. The week leading up to Sunday felt like the longest of my life. Every interaction with my children carried a new weight, a new tension. They called more frequently, their voices carrying that careful tone people use when they're monitoring someone they believe is declining. Sarah stopped by Wednesday with groceries I hadn't asked for. I was at Whole Foods anyway, she said, though she lived 20 minutes in the opposite direction. She lingered in my kitchen, her eyes scanning for signs of ... What? Spoiled food, unpaid bills, evidence of the cognitive decline she was so convinced was happening. Dad, are you eating enough? She asked, opening my refrigerator and examining its contents like a health inspector. I'm eating fine, Sarah. Because there are meal delivery services now. Very convenient. Everything pre-portioned and delivered right to your door. You don't even need to plan or shop. The irony wasn't lost on me. My daughter, who couldn't balance her own budget without Mike's help, was questioning my ability to feed myself. Thursday brought a visit from David, ostensibly to check on the house, but really to assess my living situation. I watched him examine my mail pile, glance at my desk organization, and even peek into my medicine cabinet when he thought I wasn't looking. Dad, this house is pretty big for one person, he mentioned casually. Have you thought about downsizing? Something smaller might be easier to maintain. I can maintain my own home. David, I'm sure you can. I'm just saying, as we get older, it makes sense to simplify, reduce responsibilities, let other people handle the complicated stuff. Every word felt like another small cut, another assumption about my declining capabilities. But the worst was yet to come. Friday afternoon, I received a call that made my blood run cold. Mr. Brooks, this is Dr. Patricia Patel's office. We have you scheduled for a comprehensive evaluation next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Your son David arranged the appointment. We'll need about 3 hours for the full battery of tests. My hands shook as I held the phone. They had actually done it. They had scheduled the evaluation without my consent, as if I were already incapacitated. I didn't request any evaluation, I said carefully. Oh well, your family was quite concerned. They mentioned some memory issues and difficulty adapting to new situations, very common for people your age. Nothing to worry about, we see this all the time. I hung up without confirming the appointment. That evening, Marcus called. Hey Dad, David mentioned he helped you set up that doctor's appointment. That's great, very proactive of you. The lie was so smooth, so casual, that it took my breath away. They were rewriting reality to fit their narrative, making me complicit in my own diminishment. Marcus, I said slowly, I never asked David to schedule anything. A pause. Oh, well, maybe there was some miscommunication, but since it's scheduled anyway, it couldn't hurt to go, right? Peace of mind for everyone. Whose peace of mind? Mine or yours? Dad, please don't be difficult about this. Difficult. That's what I'd become to them. A difficult old man who couldn't see his own limitations. Saturday was the breaking point. I was at Stop and Shop, doing my weekly grocery shopping, when I ran into Tom Morrison, Janet's husband, from the community center board. We'd known each other for nearly 2 decades. Alex, he called out, approaching with his cart. Good to see you. Hey, I heard about the insurance situation. Tough break. I forced a smile. These things happen. Jennifer can be pretty intense about modernization, he said diplomatically. Between you and me, I think she's overcompensating. New job, wants to make an impression, but she's got the board convinced that digital everything is the way forward. I understand. Tom hesitated, then leaned closer. Alex, can I ask you something? Are you doing okay? I mean, health-wise. Janet mentioned your kids are concerned about your memory and decision-making. The humiliation was complete. Not only were my children questioning my competency, they were sharing their concerns with the entire community. My reputation, built over decades, was being destroyed by whisper campaigns about my supposed cognitive decline. My memory is fine, Tom. Of course. It's just that, well, when someone starts losing clients, becomes resistant to change, shows signs of isolation, people talk, they worry. I nodded and excused myself, but the damage was done. By Sunday, half of Westchester County would probably know that Alexander Brooks was having issues. That night, I sat in my study with my planner open, staring at the investment records that would soon shock my family into silence. But for the first time, I felt something beyond anticipation. I felt anger, deep, burning anger at being dismissed, patronized, and humiliated by the very people who were supposed to love and respect me. Sunday morning dawned gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I spent extra time preparing for what would either be my vindication or my family's final push toward guardianship proceedings. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue Eleanor had picked out for our 35th anniversary. I made sure my planner was properly organized, with all the relevant pages marked. I even printed out recent stock quotes from my computer. Yes, I did know how to use technology when necessary, to have current values ready. At 3 p.m., I arrived at Sarah and Mike's house for what they thought would be a routine family dinner. What they didn't know was that this meal would change everything. The whole family was there again. Sarah and Mike, David and Lisa, Marcus, and even the grandchildren playing in the next room. The atmosphere felt celebratory, as if they'd already won some victory. Dad, Sarah greeted me with an overly bright smile. You look wonderful. How are you feeling? I'm feeling very clear-headed, actually, I replied, settling into my usual chair with my planner. David poured wine for everyone, including me. Dad, we wanted to apologize if Thursday felt like an ambush. We just worried about you. We love you so much, Lisa added. We want to make sure you're taken care of. Marcus nodded. And after you see Dr. Patel on Tuesday, we'll have a better understanding of how to support you going forward. I took a sip of wine and smiled. Actually, I won't be keeping that appointment. The room fell silent. Dad, David said carefully, I really think you should reconsider. Dr. Patel is excellent, and I'm not reconsidering anything, I interrupted, because there's something you all need to understand about your supposedly declining father. I opened my planner to the investment section. You've spent weeks telling me I'm behind the times, that my methods are outdated, that I can't manage my own affairs. You've questioned my judgment, my competency, even my sanity. You've discussed putting me in a home and taking away my legal rights." The silence was deafening. "So before we go any further down that path, I think you should know exactly what your cognitively impaired father has been managing with this ancient paper planner." I turned the planner toward them so they could see my handwritten records. On September 15, 1997, I purchased 1,000 shares of Apple Computer at $18 per share. After stock splits, that position is now 28,000 shares worth approximately $4.90 million. Sarah's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. But that's not all. In 1999, I started accumulating Microsoft. In 2001, Amazon. In 2004, Google at their IPO. In 2012, Tesla. I pulled out the printed stock quotes I'd prepared. My total portfolio value, as of Friday's close, is $8.2 million. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. 8 million, 8.2 million, I corrected. All tracked and managed with this embarrassing paper planner you've been mocking. David's face had gone completely white. "Dad, I had no idea. Double quotes, of course you didn't. Because instead of asking me about my financial situation, you assumed I was incompetent. Instead of trusting the man who raised you, provided for you, and managed his affairs successfully for decades, you decided I needed a competency evaluation." I stood up, my planner still open to the investment pages. "So here's my question for all of you. Who exactly needs their decision-making abilities assessed? What would you do in a situation like this? Would you forgive your family for doubting you? Or would this change your relationship with them forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below." The silence that followed my revelation felt like it could crack the walls. I watched as 3 decades of my children's assumptions about me crumbled in real time, their faces cycling through disbelief, shock, and what I can only describe as mortification. Sarah was the first to break. Her hands started shaking so violently that Mike had to take her wineglass before she dropped it. 8 million, she whispered, staring at my planner like it was written in a foreign language. "Dad, how is that possible?" "It's possible," I said calmly, "because while you were all focused on the latest apps and digital trends, I was quietly building wealth using methods that actually work." Marcus looked like he might be sick. "But you drive a 2015 Honda Civic. You shop at regular grocery stores. You live like ... Like what? Like someone who doesn't need to flash his wealth to feel important." David finally found his voice, though it cracked when he spoke. "Dad, I'm a financial advisor. How could you not tell me about this? I could have helped you optimize your portfolio, diversify better, minimize tax implications." I laughed, actually laughed at the irony. "You could have helped me. David, your biggest client has a portfolio worth maybe $2 million, and you've been lecturing me about financial competency. My outdated paper system has outperformed every managed fund you've ever recommended." "But the risk management." "What risk?" I interrupted. "I bought and held blue-chip companies during their growth phases. I didn't day trade or chase trends. I didn't panic during market downturns or get greedy during bubbles. I simply identified good companies and stayed patient." Old-fashioned concepts, apparently. Lisa, who had been silent this entire time, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Brooks, we had no way of knowing. You're so private about everything." "Private?" I turned to her with incredulity. "I'm private because every time I mention anything about my life, you all assume I'm doing it wrong. When I said I preferred my paper planner, you staged an intervention. When I lost one client, you assumed I was failing. When I valued my independence, you scheduled a psychiatric evaluation behind my back." The weight of what they'd done seemed to hit them all at once. "Dad," Sarah said, tears starting to form, "we thought we were helping. You seemed so ... isolated after Mom died, so resistant to change. We were scared you were sliding into decline. So instead of talking to me like an adult, you decided to treat me like an incapacitated elderly person who couldn't manage his own life." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "Jesus, Dad, I told people you were embarrassing. I told my girlfriends, parents that my father was stuck in the past and couldn't adapt to the modern world. And now," he looked up at me with something that might have been respect, for the first time in years, "now I realize I'm the one who had no idea what was going on." David suddenly leaned forward, his financial advisor brain kicking into gear. "Dad, wait. If you've been managing this yourself, What about estate planning? Tax optimization? Have you structured this properly for inheritance purposes? The question hung in the air, and I could see the calculations starting in all there. Mine's $8 million, divided 3 ways. Their children's college funds, early retirements, dream houses. Ah, I said softly. And there it is. There's what? Sarah asked. The real question. Not Dad, we're sorry for treating you like an incompetent child. Not Dad, we should have trusted your judgment. The real question. What happens to the money? David's face flushed. Dad, that's not what I meant, isn't it? I closed my planner and looked around the table. 5 minutes ago, you were ready to put me in a home. Now you're worried about tax optimization. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different weight. They were all thinking the same thing, and we all knew it. Mike, who had been trying to comfort Sarah, finally spoke. Mr. Brooks, I think what David was trying to ask is whether you've considered getting professional help to manage something this substantial. Not because you're incapable, but because the complexity. Mike, I interrupted gently. I appreciate that you're trying to be diplomatic, but let me ask you something. If I can successfully manage an $8 million portfolio for 20 years using a paper planner, what makes you think I need help managing it now? He had no answer. I stood up from the table, my planner tucked under my arm. I think I've given you enough to process for one evening. Dad, wait, Sarah called out as I headed for the door. We need to talk about this more. We should, ... You should what, Sarah? Apologize for spending weeks questioning my mental capacity. Apologize for discussing guardianship behind my back. Apologize for sharing your concerns about my decline with half the community. She winced at each point. Or should we talk about how to structure my estate so you can inherit as much as possible while paying the least taxes? That's not fair, David protested. We were genuinely worried about you. Were you? Or were you worried about the embarrassment of having a father who didn't fit your image of what a modern senior citizen should be? I paused at the door and turned back to face them one last time. You know what the saddest part is? For 20 years, I've been building this wealth, not just for my security, but for yours, for my grandchildren's educations, for your peace of mind. I wanted to surprise you when I turned 70, maybe help you with mortgages or start college funds. The tears in Sarah's eyes spilled over, but watching how quickly you assumed I was incompetent, how icily you dismissed decades of successful decision-making, how willing you were to take away my autonomy, it makes me wonder if you deserve the security I've been building for you. Marcus looked stricken. Dad, we can fix this. We can make this right. Can you? Can you undo the fact that you scheduled the psychiatric evaluation without my consent? Can you undo telling the community that I'm having cognitive problems? Can you undo the humiliation of being treated like a burden by my own children? I opened the door, then paused. I'll be canceling that appointment with Dr. Patel tomorrow, and I'll be taking some time to think about a lot of things, including what kind of legacy I want to leave, and to whom. The drive home was surreal. For weeks, I had felt small, diminished, questioned at every turn. Now, suddenly, I felt powerful again. But it wasn't the money that made me feel powerful. It was the vindication, the proof that I had been right all along. But as I pulled into my driveway, another emotion crept in alongside the satisfaction. Sadness, deep, profound sadness that it had taken a financial revelation to earn my children's respect. That they couldn't see my worth as a person, as their father, without a dollar figure attached to it. Inside my house, I sat in Eleanor's favorite chair, the one I'd kept exactly as she left it, and opened my planner to a page I hadn't looked at in months. There, in her handwriting from just weeks before she died, was a note she'd left for me. Alex, the kids love you, but they don't understand you. Don't let their worry turn into control. You're stronger and smarter than they realize. Stay true to yourself. I love you. I closed the planner and sat in the growing darkness, wondering if Eleanor would be proud of how I'd handled things tonight, or if she'd be disappointed that I'd let anger drive my response. Outside, a car pulled into my driveway, then another, then a third. My children had followed me home. I watched through my living room window as 3 car doors slammed shut almost in unison. David, Sarah, and Marcus stood in my driveway for a moment, clearly debating among themselves about who should approach first. Finally, Sarah stepped forward, her face illuminated by my porch light, tears still visible on her cheeks. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by gentle knocking. "Dad." Sarah's voice was muffled through the door. "Please, we need to talk." I sat in Eleanor's chair for another moment, her note still in my hands. Part of me wanted to let them stand out there in the cold October evening, to let them experience just a fraction of the isolation I'd felt these past weeks. But Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. "The kids love you, but they don't understand you." I opened the door to find all three of them standing there, looking more uncertain than I'd seen them since they were children. "May we come in?" David asked quietly. I stepped aside without a word. They filed into my living room awkwardly, like teenagers who'd been caught breaking curfew. No one seemed to know where to sit or what to say first. Marcus broke the silence. "Dad, I need to say something, and I need to say it right away because I can't stand another second of knowing how wrong I was." I remained standing, my arms crossed. "I'm ashamed," he continued, his voice cracking. "I'm ashamed of how I treated you. I'm ashamed of what I said about you to other people. I'm ashamed that I thought your experience and wisdom were less valuable than my computer science degree and my Tesla." Sarah stepped forward. "Dad, we all are. We're ashamed and we're sorry, and we know that saying those words isn't enough to undo what we've done to you." "Then why are you here?" I asked. David answered. "Because we realized something driving over here. We didn't just disrespect you, we lost you. Somewhere in all our worry and our assumptions and our interventions, we forgot who you actually are. And who am I? David, you're the man who worked 2 jobs to put us through college without loans. You're the man who nursed Mum through cancer while never missing one of our important events. You're the man who taught me everything I know about integrity and hard work and making smart decisions." His voice broke. "And somehow, we convinced ourselves that using a paper planner made all of that irrelevant." I felt my anger beginning to soften, but I wasn't ready to let them off the hook yet. "Sit down," I said finally. They sat on my couch like a row of defendants awaiting sentencing. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked, settling back into Eleanor's chair. It wasn't the mocking. It wasn't even the threats of guardianship. It was the assumption that age automatically equals incompetence. That my methods were wrong simply because they were old. Sarah wiped her eyes. "We were scared, Dad. After Mum died, we were terrified of losing you too. And when we saw you isolating yourself, resisting change, seeming so separate from the world we live in, we panicked. So you decided to control me instead of trusting me." "Yes," Marcus said simply. "And we were wrong." I opened my planner to Eleanor's note and showed it to them. "Your mother wrote this 2 weeks before she died. She knew this day would come." They read it in silence, and I watched their faces crumble as they realized the depth of what they'd done. "She knew you loved me," I continued, "but she also knew you'd try to manage me like I was one of your projects instead of your father." "Dad," Sarah said softly, "how do we fix this?" "I don't know if you can." The words hung in the air like a judgment. "But I'm willing to try to find out," I added, and saw the relief flood their faces. "What do you need from us?" David asked. "I need you to understand something about respect. Real respect isn't conditional on wealth or success or meeting your expectations. It's based on trust, on history, on recognizing that someone might know things you don't." They nodded, but I wasn't finished. "I also need you to understand that your mother and I didn't raise you to be entitled. The fact that I have money doesn't mean you automatically deserve access to it. Inheritance is a gift, not a right." Marcus looked stricken. "Dad, we weren't thinking about inheritance when we weren't you." David's first question wasn't an apology. It was about tax optimization. David's face reddened. "You're right. I'm sorry the advisor in me took over, but that's no excuse. Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice taking on the authoritative tone I'd used when they were children. "First, you're going to call Dr. Patel's office tomorrow and explain that the appointment was scheduled without the patient's consent and needs to be cancelled immediately." "Done," David said immediately. "Second, you're going to contact anyone you've discussed my supposed cognitive issues with and set the record straight. I don't care how embarrassing it is for you. My reputation in this community matters to me." "Of course," Sarah said. "Third, we're going to establish some new boundaries. My financial affairs are my business unless I choose to share them. My lifestyle choices are my business unless I'm actually endangering myself. My methods of organization and planning are my business, period." "Understood," Marcus said. I leaned forward. "But here's the most important thing. I need to know that you love and respect me as your father, not as a potential inheritance. Because if this money is going to change how you see me, we have a bigger problem than I thought." Sarah stood up and walked over to me. "Dad, can I hug you?" I nodded, and she wrapped her arms around me like she had when she was little and needed comfort after a nightmare. "I love you because you're my dad," she whispered. "Because you read me stories and taught me to ride a bike and walked me down the aisle. Because you held our family together when Mum was sick. The money, the money is just proof of something we should have already known." "What's that?" "That you're incredibly smart and capable, and we should have trusted you all along." David and Marcus joined the hug, and for a moment we were just a family again. Imperfect, complicated, but bound by something deeper than money or pride. When we separated, I opened my planner to a fresh page. "I want to show you something," I said, beginning to write. "This is how I tracked my first Apple purchase." I wrote the date, the number of shares, the price per share, and my reasoning for the investment. September 15th, 1997. Apple Computer seemed dead. Stock was at historic lows. Everyone said Steve Jobs couldn't save the company, but I remembered the Apple II, and I believed in the power of innovation to surprise people. I showed them the entry. This isn't just record keeping, it's the story of a decision. The date reminds me of what the world looked like then. The reasoning reminds me why I thought it was worth the risk. Marcus studied the entry. "It's like a diary of your investment philosophy." "Exactly. Every purchase in here tells a story. When I bought Amazon in 2001, everyone said online retail would never work. When I bought Tesla in 2012, people said electric cars were toys for rich environmentalists." "How did you know?" David asked. I smiled. I didn't know, but I understood something that algorithms and digital trading platforms don't: patience. I wasn't trying to get rich quick. I was trying to participate in the long-term growth of companies that were changing the world. "And you tracked it all by hand?" Sarah marveled. "By hand, with attention, with intention. Each entry required me to think about what I was doing and why. No automatic investments, no mindless following of trends. Every decision was deliberate." I closed the planner. "That's what you almost took away from me. Not just my independence, but my method of staying connected to my choices and their consequences." "We understand now," Marcus said. "And Dad, I want you to know that I'm going to tell everyone who listen about how brilliant you are, about how wrong I was to judge your methods. I don't need you to overcompensate, son. I just need you to respect me." If you're enjoying this story of family, forgiveness, and the wisdom that comes with age, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more real-life stories that matter. And please, share. In the comments below, what city are you listening from? We love connecting with our community around the world. The evening ended with us sitting around my kitchen table, my planner open between us, as I told them the stories behind each investment. For the first time in months, we talked not as a family in crisis, but as adults, sharing experiences and insights. But as they prepared to leave, I knew our relationship had fundamentally changed. They would never again assume they knew better than me, simply because they were younger or more familiar with modern technology. The question was, would they be able to handle that shift in power? And more importantly, would I be able to forgive them enough to trust them with the legacy I'd been building? Only time would tell.